Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Conversation, a series exploring the makings of our exhibitions. In this case, we're talking about Deepfakes, Art and Its Double, an exhibition created and led by lead creator and director, Professor Sarah Kenderdine at EPFL Pavilions, Amplifier for Art, Science and Society at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, EPFL Lausanne, an exhibition on view until May 1st, 2022. My name is Monica Antohi. I'm communications lead with EPFL Pavilions. And today I have the honor of speaking with Bas Korsten, Global Chief Creative Officer at Wunderman-Thompson, the mind behind the Next Rembrandt, one of the original cultural deepfakes and one of the installations in our Deepfakes Art and Its Double exhibition. Bas Korsten is a giant in the creative industry. He's one of the most recognized and awarded creatives of our generation. He's the recipient of tremendous amounts of awards like Adweek, Top 10 Global Creative Leaders, and Ad Age's Creative 50, one of the 50 most creative people of 2016, as well as over 34 Cannes Lions Awards as of 2021. Bas, thank you for taking this time to speak with me, and a heartfelt welcome.
Absolutely. Very nice to speak to you, Monica.
Thank you so much again. So let's dive directly into the conversation. How does one become global chief creative? What brought you there? What brought you into advertising? What kind of upbringing did you have to literally propulse you into this kind of environment and to bring you to the peak of an industry?
Yeah, how long do we have? So I like writing, and when I was at the end of high school, there was a professor who said you should study Dutch language because you have a knack for language, you like writing. But my dad was a professor in the English literature, and he said, well, it's really hard to get a good job, and you should do logistics. That's the trade of the future. And he wasn't wrong. It was just that he was, I think, thinking about the wrong things that would make me happy. But I did anyway, so I followed his advice, became an engineer in logistics. And at the end of that, I started doing business school because I knew that I wasn't going to be a logistics engineer, and it took me 4 years to get to that insight. But then when I started doing business school, I learned about marketing and I learned about advertising, and that actually brands don't do their own advertising, but they have like agencies for that. I was 24 at the time. I didn't know that. I was pretty naive. But that's when I thought, okay, hold on. So I like the context of businesses. I love brands. I like writing. So maybe advertising is something for me. So then I started harassing people to hire me. I mean, stalking is maybe a better word than harassing, because I think that's one of the things that, to your point, has brought me to where I am. Is I can be quite relentless, and if I think something is a good idea, and I think it should see the light of day, then it will see the light of day. So, and I think that is something that if you throughout my career, that's been a red thread is getting these projects off the ground that people think are undoable or unrealistic. I love I love it when people think stuff can't be done, because then I'm gonna double down on it and just it was the same.
Here's how it's done.
Yeah. So, well, and again, that's it. Without having any scientific base to base that on, just my love for the idea is something that I use to propel myself and people around me into believing that it's possible. So I think that, I don't know if that answers your question, but that is how I got into advertising, the writing side of things, and then I discovered ideas, and there's nothing as interesting as an idea.
Exactly.
And in my role today, I get to see so many of them, which is like having your birthday every day. So I get these ideas sent to me. It's like opening a package. And sometimes it's disappointing, like with any birthday, you're disappointed with the gifts you get. But every once in a while, there's some really good gifts. And I will do everything in my power to make sure those ideas, those little babies almost, grow up to be full-fledged ideas. So I think that's basically what drives me is ideas. And sometimes I get disconnected from the work a bit too much. So then I feel I'm managing rather than being creative. And then I need to go down again and go like, okay, I need to get my feet into a project and actually do something with my mind again, because I think also the pandemic has been it's been really good from a efficiency perspective. But efficiency is actually a killer for creativity, because creativity is all about the inefficient distribution of attention, and that's something that we should not forget. So rather than getting stuck behind a screen for 9 hours a day, we should disconnect and allow our minds to make the connections that need to be made to get to these new, interesting and relevant notions, which is basically the definition of creativity.
You're touching upon inspiration. In one of your previous talks, you're talking about the huge, that's not that huge difference, the creativity and the inspiration part, and how inspiration is actually an action driven. You have something at the end of inspiration, which is it was kind of like a light bulb moment for me, because I'm like, exactly, it's exactly that. It makes perfect sense, because with creativity you can stay in your head. But when it comes to something that inspires you, there's that drive to move, to do it, to now. And it seems like that can be cultivated in some ways, right? But you're talking about sitting behind a desk 9 hours a day. You lose that if you're not presented with external factors that kind of break that pattern, break the day-to-day.
Absolutely. So there's different phases to inspiration, and one of it is preparation, which is getting as much input as you can. So I don't think that the current situation that we're all living in is helpful with that, because it's mostly Netflix now. Theaters are closed, museums are closed. So what is the best way to fill your head with interesting things? And then the other a very important phase, and that's also touches on the inefficiency story that I just talked about, is it's incubation. And that means that you have to disconnect and allow your brain to make connections between the different elements of information that are inside your head that you've built up in the preparation phase. And that incubation phase means disconnecting. And I think technology really keeps us focused, and that focus is actually a big enemy of inspiration, just because it disturbs that incubation phase. It doesn't allow your brain to get into the alpha state where it easily connects dots that you have inside your head. So there's this research that shows that people that disconnect from technology and go hiking in nature are actually 50% more creative when they come back after a certain period. In this case, it was 4 days, than people who stayed in an urban environment. And that is just because nature allows your brain to get into that state. Disconnection from technology allows your brain to wander and make these connections more easily. And the way that they tested that was, when the people came back, they asked them to list uncommon uses of common objects. So they would ask you, can you think of different ways of using a spoon than for eating soup? And you would go like, well, an egg race, heroin shot, Well, I'm not.
That shouldn't be the first thing that comes into your mind.
No. It was a second, by the way. No, egg race. That was kind of nice, right?
Sure.
And similar to a newspaper. So a newspaper is to convey information, but you can also wrap fish in it. You can also put it in the cat litter. And so how many uses can you come up with? And that people coming back from a hike in nature scored 50% better. So I think it's
numbers
in our industry that we understand how our brain works for us to be able to be more creative and deliver more creative solutions for our clients.
I'd love to go to neuroscience, but next. But I think that I'd like to know what dots were you connecting when you came up with the idea for the Next Rembrandt? Where were you? Which part of the world were you, and which part of nature were you that you were able to come up with something so drastically different that from anything from before?
I think often with these things, it's also about some stars aligning. So there was this briefing that we had gotten from ING Bank in the Netherlands, and they are a big sponsor of arts and culture in the Netherlands. And there was an exhibition, which was the late Rembrandt, which had his the latter part of his body of work exhibited. And so that was happening. Then they asked us, can you come up with an idea for a gift for the Rijksmuseum? Because we've been sponsoring the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam for 10 years, and we want to give them a gift. And then I was reading an article in National Geographic about how some archaeologists had found skulls in the Jerusalem area that they constructed the face of Jesus with. So with the old historic material, they created Jesus's face. And I think that's how then creativity works. So there's an exhibition on the late Rembrandt. I need something physical to give to the Rijksmuseum, and then there is this finding in Jerusalem, and that made me think about, what if we could think about using AI to actually look at the total body of work of Rembrandt, and then from that create a new Rembrandt out of that. So every piece of that new Rembrandt would somehow come from his past. And I think that's also what the link to the National Geographic article was. So, but that was actually the easy part.
Yeah, but that's the most important part. I know you think it's easy. Nobody else thought of that idea before. Not that easy to come up with such a completely out of the blue idea. But then the implementation. My Lord, how many people worked on that?
A lot. And I think Rembrandt would roll around in his grave laughing if he saw how many people it took and how long it took us to get
one painting.
Yeah. But he was so I think he would have liked what we did, as just me assuming something. But he was a very innovative painter himself. So he used the back of the palette knife to paint, and so he was always looking for new ways of improving his work. And I think that is also what's interesting about this project is it has given young art students so many tools to work with, also digital art students, as to what you can do, what made Rembrandt, the choices he made, and how that comes to life. But also, how do you, from a 2D image, go through a 3D image, because the painting had height. So it took us, I think, 18 months but I think, and that goes back to how we started this conversation, it's about being relentless, because I think at that time, to your point, no one had gone in that space yet. I think there was a lot of talk in 2016 around mankind versus computers, and
we still have that conversation. It's still,
yeah, although it has, I think that it has slightly changed. So I think we love, as humans, we love the idea of, oh, the robots are gonna come and they're gonna take over, and we actually, but if
Terminator kind.
That's just, I don't know, our fatalistic side, if that's a word. But I think over time, over the past years, that have shifted from man versus machine to man and machine. So to actually create superhumans that make use of the technology rather than fight it. And I think this was the first project. So there was a project, I think from Google, where they actually beat the world champion in Go, the Japanese game.
Yeah.
I think that happened around the same time. And I think we're the first to take it into the creative space. And I think that's also why this project had gotten so much traction, and why we're still talking about it, is when it comes to creativity, is that's a domain that is only for humans, or can computers play a role in that as well? And I think in that whole view of, oh, they're taking over, are they able to even do this? I mean, if you think about how much training it took to get the AI to do this, it feels like we're very far off from a computer coming up with this idea themselves and executing it. So I think we're not there yet. But I think that's what, as I said, gave it so much traction, is because people were all of a sudden thinking, okay, so now they also come into the art space and the creativity space. So where does this end? So I think that is why a lot of people talked about this and wanted to know more about how this came about, and where it's going to go as well.
Yes, and the breakthrough was yes, training the AI to recognize the faces, the eyes, the hats, the colors, the specific points on a person, in order for it to create something new. It was our choice. It was human interaction with it's like you said, it was us and the AI working together in creating this. But still having those kinds of capabilities, having that kind of technological capability we had in 2016, and applying it to this. It wasn't done. It wasn't done before. It's breakthrough then. It was breakthrough then. It still feels like a breakthrough today. For different reasons, it feels like a breakthrough today. With all the metaverse and all of the digital artwork that's happening right now, and all of this move from tactile and real to the digital world, to this digital sphere that we're trying to go towards. Some of us are trying to go towards. Where is this? We're starting to lose that. There's no more barrier. There's no more. It feels very fluid. This interaction with AI, this version of reality that we're kind of experiencing right now. Where do you see that going in terms of advertising? How do you see that in terms of trends when it comes to presenting a brand and writing a story? And do you think we're ready to experience that in the digital world, in the metaverse part of our world?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I don't know if we're ready. I think it's happening, and we're all in the middle of it. I think it's interesting that to your point about, and I hadn't thought about that myself, but we had the painting on a USB stick, which and which is weird to think about. But also, I jokingly said to some people who said, "Can we buy this?" I said, "Well, I can print you a copy for 75 euros."
I'll have one. I'll take one.
Yeah. Well,
I will personally take one. It is mind blowing. Every time I go into the exhibition, it's and it's beyond the painting that's mind blowing. It's the whole thing around it, behind it. It's just knowing that story. It's what makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, no, I think, but to think about what art is and the part of art that is about exclusivity. When you can print something 1,000 or 1,000,000 times, you lose the value, and that's also where the NFT movement has come from. So this could easily be a great NFT. So in that sense, it does translate into what's happening right now, and how to think about art, and how art was actually the start of NFTs. What I find interesting is when, and probably it's similar to people buying a Van Gogh print at IKEA. That's not the real thing. And you know that there's quite a few people that have that copy on the wall. But that's also with the NFTs. If you have the real thing, it's quite easy to make a screen dump of that visual and go like, well, I have one. And it just feels like is there enough distinction between the two for the value to be attributed to the actual original? And I think that's something that we're finding out. So I think there's a bit of a bubble going on, but I just don't know how big it is, and how much of it is actual bubble. So I think that's what we're going to find out. And I find it very interesting. And I had a town hall yesterday with the North America team, and I read a bit about, I read a piece of the Sapiens book from Yuval Harari about how we as humans are dominating the world as a species because we believe in things that don't exist, like gods and nations and money and human rights. Those things don't exist in the real world, but they exist in our collective memory and in the collective brains. So our ability to tell stories and to believe in things that aren't real make us the leaders of this particular universe. And he says physically we are quite close to chimpanzees, but the reason why we are ruling the world and chimpanzees are in zoos and research facilities is because if you promise a chimpanzee to give him a banana, so for him to give you a banana in exchange for endless amounts of bananas when he goes to chimpanzee heaven, he's not going to give you the banana because he's
the marshmallow experiment, right?
Yeah. So the fact that, and I think that's, so my point being, the metaverse is a virtual world. It doesn't exist, but we humans, we are very good at believing in these kinds of stories and galvanizing ourselves behind them. So I think rather than Second Life, I think this one will stick and this one will stay. So, and I think the pandemic has helped with that as well, because we connect virtually so much easier now, like we are doing now. And to have a specific space in which that world unfolds itself, I think is something valuable. So I think this is one that's here to stay, and I think it's very interesting to see what it does to the art world and to the appreciation of art. Yeah, very excited to see.
Yeah, you're touching upon NFTs. We can go into guns as well. the machine learning, the natural language processing, the huge data storage. There's so much that's coming and that's happening right now in terms of new technology that I personally see all of the sci-fi I've ever written kind of happening all at the same time. Because you know, like you read one book and it's talking about genetic engineering. They kind of stay with that version. They don't or you know, going to the stars, or robots taking over, or whatever it is. But I feel like we're living in all of these futures at the same time, and it feels super exciting and a bit terrifying, because you were talking about the fatalistic brain earlier, and I think that's kicking in because you're seeing all of this genetic engineering and genetic manipulation happening all over the world, and we're talking about storing data in at the DNA level because of, you know, the capabilities of that. We're talking about AIs basically. None of them have passed the Turing test yet, so we're still good. Hopefully. How long? By the way, how long do you think that's going to take in terms of what you're seeing right now? When do you think that's going to happen? Do you think that's even going to happen? An AI passing the Turing test? Because
yeah. So I think I think what's interesting, and I think you're right, it's all going quite fast, and I think also that's why I love being at the forefront of technology, is because that's where you can make these interesting connections that nobody's made yet. But I think what is very important is that we quickly develop ethics around these new technologies, and that's not easy, but I think it's very important because it's going so fast, and the lines are sometimes so blurry that it is very important to, as a species collectively, we need to make sure that we agree on what we think is right and what not. And of course, there are also some elements in this reality that want to make use of it or misuse it. So I think we quickly need to get our heads around what do we think is ethically right, and it takes more than the big tech companies, and you've seen the discussions around Facebook, and you've seen the discussions about big data. So it is important that we govern that, and that we make sure that we keep that in check, because I mean, we've been eating little cherry tomatoes for a long time. Those aren't natural; those are genetically engineered. But we all feel that that's fine. Or like yellow paprikas that look really perfect. That's all genetic engineering, and that's all fine. But when in Korea people start making glow-in-the-dark cats, like real ones, that's where you go, okay, is that the best way to use this technology? And I think that's where we, as a species, need to get our heads together around what do we think is right, what is wrong, what goes too far. I'm actually, and I think I didn't do that on purpose with the Next Rembrandt, and I'm working on a very interesting idea. I've been working on it for years already. I'm not gonna, I can't reveal it here, but it is about genetic rescue and cultured meat, the revolution in cultured meat that we're seeing. So I think those kind of projects can help us get started on those ethical discussions, because they're in the art space, so they're not meant to do anything but provoke a discussion about the subjects at hand. I mean, in Harvard, they're trying to revive the woolly mammoth. Why?
Jurassic Park idea.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a great movie. Although they should stop making sequels.
Yes.
but why? So I think we need to, and that's to the ethical point is, why are we doing this? Is this benefiting the species in any way? Is this benefiting the planet in any way? And I think those are the important questions that we need to ask ourselves. And does this open a door to misuse of the technology? So we just almost need like a governing body when it comes to new technologies and how that should be applied and what the limits are. But I like playing on the edge of those worlds and seeing if I can create something that gets people talking, and it also gets the ethical discussion going.
You were talking about cultured meat in the art space, and that's they're two very distinct and separate terms and concepts. How did you decide to bring them together?
Yeah,
cultured.
Well, the whole idea of cultured meat just blows my mind.
Yeah,
and
is it the inspiration from that movie, from the Soylent movie?
No, it was a news article about a hamburger that cost $250,000 that was created by Mosa Meat. Again, I think 10 years ago, or maybe even shorter. And one of the Google founders had invested in that company and in making that hamburger. And it was just blowing my mind that you could make a hamburger for $250,000. But the idea of taking a cell from a living animal and creating meat out of that, they had recently the first cultured meat was approved by the Singaporean government, and you could actually eat a chicken nugget next to the chicken it came from. So rather than having to butcher the chicken, the chicken can stay alive. I think at the moment the process costs a lot of energy, so that's something that needs to be resolved. But from a climate saving, if you think about cows, methane,
the
amounts of water needed to create
the grain, their feed.
Yeah, so it is such an important, and even though that might not go all the way in the end, I think to highlight that kind of innovation, I think is very important. And it's not necessarily combining cultured meat and art, but cultured meat and genetic rescue. So the woolly mammoth I just talked about is about recreating the DNA of species that have gone missing, or what's the right word for that?
Extinct.
Extinct. Thank you. I think that's fascinating, because that's also the input that you need to make cultured meat. So maybe there's something interesting there. So and I think, again, the discussion about the meat industry and the impact on climate change, the whole discussion about genetic rescue and the importance or unimportance of that, I think is interesting to think about. And to my earlier point about stars aligning, it just feels like that's a discussion that is just emerging, and similar to AI and creativity was a discussion that was emerging in 2016. It just feels like somehow these projects have a natural way of coming to life, and and then it's just because I think that's also what you asked earlier, is then you just have to do them, which is ridiculous, because every time you mention an idea like that to people go, well, that's not possible. I said, well, I know.
Thanks, I'm gonna go do it.
But we're gonna do it anyway. And the reason why I don't really feel like I should abide by the law of physics or reality is just because that's the beauty about dreaming, is no one can stop you from dreaming. And then you just start, and then you run into things, and then it's a matter of, and especially because when you go into a certain field, all of a sudden you meet a lot of people that know the boundaries of what they think is possible, and then it just is all about protecting that naive enthusiasm and the fact that you just don't know enough about the actual field to know what's possible, and then push through. So that's what I that's what I love to do. It's pretty stupid when you think about it, but it's no, it's stupid in the sense that there's nobody asked for this. Nobody asked for the next Rembrandt. So it's just something that feels like it needs to be there, and that's, for me, is the drive. So there's not a logical explanation of where this comes from or why I have the need to do that, but I just need to, and I feel that that's part of who I am, and what I like about it is that you get to learn a lot about lots of different interesting things that are happening around the world, and the problems that they could help solve, and to get that to, and I think that's also the power of an idea, is there were a lot of people that didn't know Rembrandt when this project came out, but through the use of technology and AI, this opened up Rembrandt to a whole new group of people, also much younger people that were coming into the project via the tech side of things. And I think that's the power of this is popular science. I'm willing to cut some scientific corners if I have to, and scientists are never willing to do that, which I like as well. They won't compromise. I will compromise, because as long as it suits the story, I'm willing to compromise, and that allows for a great dynamic in these processes. It's never easy, but it's always interesting. And I think more and more scientists start to understand the power of these kind of stories to get their research out in the world through a more popular lens, just to get more eyeballs on it. So I find these projects super interesting.
You mentioned two things that are very important, that stuck out. Popularizing hard science, basically, which is a way of not educating, but bringing it to the masses, which it's phenomenal. And the other thing that I really liked that you were talking about is the fact that a creative would go into a field that they don't know much about, but because they don't know much about, they're not bound by the people in that field's limitations on the subject. So bringing that kind of new person completely out of the subject, like you bring in an artist into a scientific lab, they're going to come up with something completely new, and it might help the scientist with the next idea, next iteration. And it's this blend of it's a blend of creativity, but it's not in creativity. It's you're presented with a new set of data that you don't know anything about, and you extrapolate, and it helps not having all of the boundaries around all of that. It helps not knowing everything about that field, actually, to come up with new ideas. So I think that's what you did, and I think that's what you're currently doing. I think that's what you're doing constantly.
Yeah, and I think you have to come back to the beginning. I think you have to pair that with some kind of, like in Holland we say, a plate in front of your head. As far as, you have to be relentless about it. You have to not be, because it's quite easy if you're in a particular field and you've worked there for 20 years. And that was also something I was very I like Hall & Oates. Okay, don't sue me. But
good music.
Yeah. It's funny. So if somebody would come, and especially somebody from an ad agency, and they would tell me, you know what, there's this computer that has made a Hall & Oates song based on their body of work, and it's actually not, it doesn't have them in it. It's just a computerized. And if you dedicated your life to Rembrandt, and if you're an expert, and there's an ad agency that's coming, like, you know what, we made the next Rembrandt. We've had, and he unfortunately passed away, Ernst van der Wetering, who was the most famous Rembrandt, and he said, this is Rembrandt prostitution. But the fact that I was in a conversation with him talking about it, and actually finding out how he looked at this, and we had so many other experts that said, no, this is actually great, just because students can learn from this so much. So it's interesting that if you're, to your point, if you're in a particular field and you've been working on something for so long, and then some childishly enthusiastic person comes with this weird thing, of course people are quite skeptical. But I think that's also part of the fun.
It's beyond fun. It sparks innovation. It sparks innovation, not just for the person that's coming up with the idea, because they might know or might not know how to actually implement it. So there's learning to be done on the person's side and on the field side, because through your idea you've initiated new ways of learning on this AI. You've engaged data scientists, and you've engaged curators, and you've a whole team of creatives around it. But in terms of AI learning, because of your idea, this enabled learning for the AI. So I think it's audacious, and I think it needs to happen. And I think that we need to have more of this. We need to swap fields now and then, and just go work in a completely different world, and just see what we can what we can do in terms of that. Because think about the impact you had just on the people that you're working with. They never would have thought of this. They never would have thought about Rembrandt. They never would have conceived to do something like the AI that actually assembled the painting. Think about the printing of the height map on that thing alone. Super highly innovative. That doesn't happen in when you're talking about getting an IKEA print. It's a very static, very papery thing. This is not. This has got contours. This has got simulated brushstrokes, but it's not the simulated brushstroke that's important. It's the idea behind it. It's the creating the height map idea behind it that was innovative.
Yeah, I think to that point, I think I'm actually talking to a British artist who was inspired by the project, and who was making digital paintings, but actually wanted to hold them in his hands, to your point, not as a flat piece. So he actually took that technology, worked with Canon, that we also worked with, and then started building on that. So I think it's to your point, and that brings us also back to the inspiration. The notion of inspiration is, if you get inspired by something, then you are running with it yourself, and probably inspiring some other people. And if that just keeps building, then I think that is more interesting than the actual physical thing itself that you created. It's everything you set in motions in these different avenues around the project.
Exactly my point. It's that's what was inspiring to me behind this painting. I look at it and I see it for what it is, because it's absolutely gorgeous. And seriously, I'm going to ask for a copy. Beyond that, it's what's mind blowing, and realizing the amount of people that have worked on this, the creative breakthroughs, the technological breakthroughs that have happened because of this, and what's inspired around the world, because it's beyond just a static thing. It's way beyond that. Yes, we have it here at EPFL Pavilions. People need to see it, and they need to understand the behind the scene part of it. And that's why you and I are talking. So that being said, I'm going to let them check out the exhibition. But I would like to talk to you a little bit more about what kind of people you're attracting, what kind of people you're bringing under your, what kind of people you're hiring, and why are you hiring them? Do you see the creativity as something that is not mandatory, but do you see it as something that's you're developing, or do you see it as something that comes innate?
Well, I think the people that I hire are creative people. So I think because I like to go where technology is going, you can't hire everyone. So I think we work a lot with external companies when it comes to very specific innovations. I mean, Microsoft's are doing some pretty amazing things at the moment. But at Wunderman-Thompson, we have creative people, and what I try to teach them is not to take no for an answer. Because if there's an idea that you believe in, you have to make sure that it sees the light of day. And sometimes that conflicts with what we do for our clients, but in most cases it helps them, because I think the Next Rembrandt helped ING, but I think it helped our other clients to think about what we can do as an agency. It helped me get more to become a better creative, just because I have more to play with in my head, and I now know what's possible and what's not. So I think hiring creative people and not allowing them to feel any boundaries, so to be completely free in their head, not restricted by anything, is, I think, what I'm looking for. And you instantly, with creative people, feel like they have that kind of unbounded creativity. If you look at their portfolio, if you speak to them, it's quite easy to spot, and that's what I look for.
Makes sense. But let's say there's do you also do, I don't want to call it trainings, how do you push forward, how do you continue to feed that creativity?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I know that was your initial question to begin with, so I'll try to answer it properly now. I think it's and I needed the Next Rembrandt for me to believe that I could do other things as well. And I think the only way to show people that no idea is weird enough is actually by doing them, just because they're so hard to do. You actually just need to show that you can see something through to the end, because that's the most inspiring thing to do. I think there are people that have this innate need to whatever they believe in, to see through to the end. But I think the best motivation for that is doing these projects again, that nobody asked for. So there's no real reason for them for being other than what's inside you. And I think that's something that you can inspire in people. It doesn't necessarily have to be there, but if somebody sees it and goes like, okay, I've been close to that process, I now know how it's done, I think that's the best training. But maybe there is to your point, maybe there is something that I should do or create to make this visible for more people. To your point, I hadn't thought about that. I just keep running in the hope that I just don't lose anyone. But maybe trying to document the process, regardless of what project it is. But actually, how does a process like that work? There are definitely
It'd be a good book to read.
Yeah. Oh God. I have so much to do already. No, I think
I'm sure, but maybe consider that.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah, I like that. I like that idea.
Okay, so with the new book on the horizon, what else are you working on? What's speaking to you these days?
Well, I mean, so it's hard because these projects take a long time, and I just don't want to let the genie out of the bottle.
Yes.
Per se on the particular ideas, but as I said before, there's an idea that's on the crossroad between genetic rescue and cultured meat. We have some very exciting ideas when it comes to AI at scale. AI at scale is basically a supercomputer that has the ability to handle 17 billion parameters at the same time. And you can ask that supercomputer, write me a new ending to the Avengers Endgame movie. And then within seconds, you have 3 different alternative endings to that movie. It's ridiculous with like script, dialogue, everything. And
jaw-dropping.
It is quite mind-blowing. So it starts, so AI at scale allows us to communicate like people, and it's quite mind-blowing what's happening there. I think another space that I'm really interested in is because we assemble, and I think you said it before, we assemble so much data on a day-to-day basis as a world, and we built these football fields full of servers, data servers that use a lot of energy and produce heat. Isn't there a more sustainable way of storing data? And data DNA storage. Yeah, data DNA storage is a technology from an innovation from Microsoft, together with the University of Washington, where they store data, which is basically zeros and ones, into DNA. Because apparently DNA, somebody, thank you God, somebody thought that was a good way to store information in. So, and we go, oh, DNA, hold on, you can definitely store information in DNA.
And the cross field thing.
Yeah, it's super interesting because they actually said we can fit the entire internet in a shoebox if we can get all the data on the internet, which you can imagine how much it is, into DNA, synthetic DNA. So you wouldn't need football fields full of servers anymore. So and then to think of something, an idea that can make that relatable for normal people, because, and of course, normal is a weird word to use in this, but for a bigger audience to understand what Microsoft's trying to do, rather than for some technicians or high-tech people, I think is what I find very interesting.
Bas, I don't even know where to go next. There's so much still to talk about, but I know you have a very limited time with us. So hit us with your closing thoughts. I would like to spend another 2 hours with you if we have the opportunity sometime in the future to keep talking. But I know you have to go. So let us know something that you would see as the future of creativity and innovation, and also where do you see advertising going for the next 5 years? Let's call it 5 years, because 10 seems like a very long time.
Yeah, no, even 5 sounds like eternity. But I think there's a particular area that we mentioned neuroscience before.
Yes.
I think it's interesting that if you're an athlete and you go to the Olympics, you train your body for days and days and days on end, and you make sure you eat right, and you make sure you have the right training process, and you want to get your body into a state to deliver that peak performance after 4 years. But in the creative industry, what are we doing to get our brain in that similar state? So we now know so much more about the brain and what creativity is and how you can improve it and how you can enhance it. Why are we not treating our brains like athletes are trained their bodies and treating their bodies? So I think that's, for me, is an interesting space. Creativity is often seen as a black box, and it's becoming more and more transparent. And I think using technology to understand it even better, I think it's a human need that we all feel to get grip on the things that we don't understand. And I think we shouldn't kill the magic, but I think there is definitely ways of improving our creativity. And I think that's also a big opportunity for the creative industry still to do better and to do more interesting things. And if you compare that creativity, that improved and enhanced creativity, with relentlessness, then you're going to see so many interesting things.
One more question, because we're talking neuroscience, we're talking training the brain. Where do you stand in terms of flow? Like going into your flow. You talk about athletes, performance, professional athletes going into their peak performance. Where's that flow? Do you know what I'm talking about when you go into a state of flow and you're either creative or you're peak performing? Everything just kind of happens. Do you think we get that by training our brains and our bodies, or do you think that just kind of comes through?
Yeah, so I think that the mind and the body are very, very intricately linked. So we shouldn't look at them as two separate things, because they aren't. I think I talked about the alpha state as a state in which the brain allows you to connect more easily. That you can reach that state by going into nature, by moving more, so by getting your body to actually move. That's why Steve Jobs had these walk paths in his in the Apple building. He would do walking meetings just because it would spark creativity. So I think there's so much we can do still to get creativity into a better space and to get our minds into the alpha state or flow, so to say. And I think part of that, and I don't want to use that to end this call, but I think part of that is disconnecting from technology and not being on the screen. No, seriously, not being behind the screen. I force myself to go out and to walk and to go into the woods and to go to the beach and to not have a horizon. A small space limits your thinking. It's weird, but the farther you can see, the bigger your ideas. So I force myself to get away from the screen, and to get myself into that state, into that flow, in order for my brain to be as creative as it can be.
That being said, I'm going to let you go into your nature walk. Bas, I'm super grateful to have had the opportunity to speak with you, and I will let you go into your walk. Thank you so much again for your time, for the insight, and for the vision, for not just with the Next Rembrandt, but for everything that you do in your everyday life, because it affects a lot more people than just the advertising industry and the brands that you're working with. It affects the people that you work with every day. It affects the people that they're impacting every day. It affects people like myself that get to experience some of your work through this particular project. It affects all the visitors. So please continue doing what you're doing, because you're a huge impact on this world, and we really appreciate it. So
thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Monica, and enjoy your day.
Thank you so much, Bas, and thanks everyone to join us for this conversation, and all the best from Lausanne.
Bye.